I think it circles back to strategy, right? And understanding what your strategy is and what you're looking to accomplish. I think that's like the biggest thing. I'm not just going into AI to just go into AI and whatever. You need to have that strategy behind to help you understand along the way, like what you need and what you're looking for.
Everywhere you turn, there's a new marketing framework. And every day, a new technology gets launched to take advantage of that latest marketing trend. But as a marketer, it's hard to move beyond high-level theories and get work done. And it's getting harder to manage the latest MarTech developments. Creative Operations is a podcast for B2B marketers who want to build a marketing engine and generate revenue. In each episode, you'll learn how to combine your creativity with the right technology and process. We all know marketing works. We just need to explore how. Let's get into the weeds and figure it out together.
So let's say you're a solo marketer and your job includes creating compelling content, driving engagement, and supporting sales, all while new AI tools promise to make your life easier. But here's the problem. How do you find the right tools that truly fit your needs? And how do you balance testing these tools with actually getting your work done? For many marketers, especially those in small teams, it's really hard. The pressure to adopt AI is constant. You're expected to do more with less, and you probably always feel like you're behind. This is where today's guest, Kristina Kroot, comes in. As a solo marketer at Empathic.ai, Kristina has been optimizing her workflows with AI for over a year, and she's figured out a way to balance testing and getting real work done. In this conversation, Kristina shares her journey from initially using ChatGPT to now leveraging Copy.ai and how these tools have transformed her day-to-day operations. And most importantly, Kristina talks about how she views AI as an assistant, which really fills in the gaps and supports her own unique set of skills. If you're wondering how your own marketing team can strike a balance with AI, then it'll be good to listen to Kristina's approach. Every marketing team right now knows about AI at this point, right? I mean, it's everywhere. But what was the first time or the first thing that you used AI for on your team? What do you remember there?
I would say ChatGPT.
Okay.
And I used it because before I became director of marketing of where I'm at Empathic, I was actually on the clinical team and doing data annotation, which required me to understand actually prompt engineering. And in helping to essentially create like conversations that we would then take in labels. So that's how I actually initially started, which helped me then in my marketing role to understand I already had that leg up of like, okay, I know how to do prompt engineering, and in AI, it's like, what's my next step in making that work for me?
Yeah, and I want to get into that comparison, how you used it before you got into your marketing role, because I know we talked about that. Well, when we think about AI, ChatGPT came out in, I believe, November 2022. So it's been like a year and a half or something like that. I mean, just in that short period of time, how have you seen it evolve from those first scenarios that you were using it into to where it is today?
I think, so it's interesting because I actually don't use ChatGPT as much anymore because I don't have the paid version. I'm still actually using an older version of ChatGPT. So it hasn't really changed much for me. I feel like it's a bit static and you can tell when it's providing that information, like that it's AI essentially. So it's not really helping me on like those conversational pieces that I'm looking for help in, that I'm whatever I'm building in, like the creative I'm building now, and helping me figure out, how do we take how we talk about our company, our product, and then building that language into the AI so it's building it off our tone, right? Our brand and our tone.
Yeah. And so can you describe like your existing marketing environment? We mentioned, earlier that you're basically a one-person show. You have some outside support. But what does your marketing team infrastructure look like right now?
Sure. So it's, as I said, it's me. And I do have a person who came on a couple weeks ago and works about part-time, very part-time. So for me, I'm using a lot of tools to be able to help me build marketing materials and then also get marketing materials. So I'm often using Canva, MailChimp, HubSpot, and Copy.ai actually to build out essentially help me build out like our marketing materials and whatever we will be doing on that side.
Yeah. And so as a smaller marketing team, like what is the appeal of AI for
Sure.
you? I mean, there's a lot of appeal, I'm sure, but like
Of course.
what are you hopeful for in that situation?
For me, it's really helping to help me build creative faster. That's what I'm finding it, right? So for me, I remember like, and I still do it, right? Like I get my pen and paper out, I write down my notes, I get my thoughts together and I put that on paper. But what I love using AI for is like, okay, here are my notes. This is a strategy of what I'm looking to do. This is like the audience I'm looking to target, et cetera. And then putting that into the AI and say like, hey, for example, I need to build a blog, a LinkedIn post, and a Facebook post, help me create that based off of this information that I provided. And then it helps me create that in seconds rather than me taking like a half a day or more, to build that out.
Mhm.
At least, right? A blog post probably takes me at least like a day to write at this point
Yeah.
before AI. And now I'm able to do these things much, much, much faster. But with heeding the warning that like I just don't take what it gives me and like go off and run with that. I'm constantly modifying and iterating the information it's providing me back. So I'm making sure it fits the brand and our tone that we're looking, that we're trying to reach out with.
And so when you say you're using AI, and you mentioned you've kind of steered away from ChatGPT lately, so
Yeah.
what actually are the software, the applications, and so forth that you're using?
So the straight AI software that I'm using is Copy.ai. That one I'm really loving because it's always constantly building off on the conversations that I'm providing it and also understanding the language that I'm building off of for our brand and like our copy. So, I'll go in and ask things like, hey, I need some help on modifying our product to fit this target. This is what our product does. This is what we think are like the top three benefits of our products for this audience that we're looking to reach, like help me modify it as such. So, and it really seems to have understand those nuances of our brand and product by me constantly inputting the information that I'm providing it.
And so now that you're with Copy AI,
Mhm.
obviously you switched from ChatGPT at some point, and Copy AI, has evolved quite a bit. I know
It has a lot.
I forget even the category that they're creating now, but it's termed something else. It's like,
They've done like a big go-to-market strategy.
yeah, GTM of
Yeah,
AI or something.
yeah.
Yeah.
So which is I myself haven't utilized that too much. I've done some peeking. I haven't had much time to do it yet, but I would love to see what it does because I do work very closely with sales right now, especially right now because we are a startup and we're growing. So I'm working really hand in hand with sales. So I would love to see, and I haven't had the time yet, but that's pretty
Hmm.
much on my list to see like what are the go-to-market options from an AI side that they're offering. I do know offhand it's like helping to personalize, maybe an email or the conversations and then how it's like rolled that over into other aspects. So it's really it has changed immensely since I started using it probably like I would say maybe a year ago at this point.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you bring up the core of this conversation that I want to get to. You said you don't have the time to test
Yeah.
some of these new features, and
Yeah.
that's like what we want to get into.
Sure.
So tell me, how did you arrive at Copy AI? Like, what was the testing that you did before you said, hey, at Empathic, we're going to use Copy AI now for
Sure.
this use case?
Yeah. So for me, it was, a time of course is of the essence. So testing can be a little bit difficult because of time. I essentially did search. I mean, this was a little bit earlier in the stages. Like I said, Copy AI, I think at the time when I started, it was still very new. So it was a very like simplified version of what it is now. At the time, which I don't know if they do now, at the time they offered a free trial. So it's like, okay, this looks like it's similar to ChatGPT, but it seems like it's a little bit more to help me on that really big content side and go to with the sales and building this content and the copywriting essentially. So I did the free trial. I tested it. I really loved it and end up going with it. So I really didn't do too much research on that one,
Hmm.
because but again, at the time there weren't many applications out there that I could afford anyway, right? Like there were maybe some other options that had a cost to it, but at the time I had no budget. So for me, it worked out, like, hey, I got it. And then ended up being very minimal. I was able to get, a subscription with them based off of whatever they priced at the time.
Hmm.
Even now, like I still struggle with figuring out, okay, what is our team's needs right now in being able to help us go faster. I, th- I think and I'm sorry if I'm rambling here, but
No, this is great stuff.
but
Thank
what
you.
I love, like, for example, and I think a lot of people should also look into is like same thing with MailChimp, right? Like I use MailChimp in marketing 10 years ago and I haven't used it in some time. I started using again, and even they have AI built into their systems where they're able to like pre-populate various creative based off of like the branding elements that I provided it, or, personalizing the emails based off of tar. So they've like companies have really come a long way in the short amount of time of providing some form of AI into, SaaS products essentially are in offering this like AI in some way, shape, or form to help you. So it's actually really nice to see that it's being built into products that I'm already utilizing.
Yeah, and that's it. And I've seen that a lot where, you know, the AI is built in to an application. And how do you wrestle with the fact that, hey, I have like Copy AI here, I have ChatGPT here. It's a dedicated platform. I can have a chat with it. That's kind of the, the mode that I'm using in order to interact there. But how do you know like when to maybe use the AI that's embedded in an application or stick with what you have? How do you think about that?
So, that for me, I right now I'm still kind of essentially always going to copy AI to really help me with anything that has to do with writing. So anything that I'm doing any form of writing in, I essentially go to that. Where I would then be using possibly these other services that have AI into it to help another process along the way. For example, we use WordPress for our website, which also has AI and some products built into it. So, for example, with SEO, it'll provide already on the side some examples of like, hey, these terms we think would be great. So I'll use that. But then I'll also go into Copy AI and say like, hey, you know what? These are some terms I came up with, but I think we could use more, provide me some other SEO options for this blog we're going to post. And I'll do that. So it's just a lot of play, but I think it circles back to strategy, right? And understanding what your strategy is and what you're looking to accomplish. I think that's like the biggest thing. I'm not just going into AI to just go into AI and whatever, because you need to have that strategy behind to help you understand along the way, like what you need and what you're looking for.
Yeah, and how do you maintain like this balance between, when to test something that's new because it's an opportunity cost, right? You have to spend time to test to see if it's good enough
Sure.
or if it's better to perhaps replace what you have now. So how do you make that decision? At least how
Uh,
have you done it so far?
so that one has been a bit difficult because, again, being like a one person team, I am, one part point two team now. Finding time to even test different products is really hard. So I don't get to do it as much as I'd like to. Like, I'd love to be able to go out there and say like, oh, I think this is something I really want to test. Let's do it. So I've almost essentially gone back and said like, okay, I know Canva, for example, is another service we use, which is something I've used previously. I know Canva can help in creating like AI generated images instead of me going out. So I'm almost like, I hate to say it, like already comfortable in the SaaS products that I'm already using, which simplifies for me needing to go out and search for elsewhere because it's already providing me with what I need as of right now. Things could change. I may not like what it's doing in the future. And if it gives me more time, if I have more time and more budget, then hopefully maybe then I could, go look into and see some
Yeah.
other products to try.
Yeah, it seems like I think it's a pretty logical way to think about it. I've seen this in other situations where you're using the AI, you're like testing the AI that's embedded in a platform
Yeah.
to see if it can help you while you're in there.
Yeah.
Versus when you look for a dedicated platform, it is really those core functions that you're looking to really get help in. And it
Right.
sounds like Kristina, you started with writing. So
Yeah.
why did you pick that like piece of marketing or that piece of your role to test first? Like, what was that process like?
That's because in marketing, we do a lot of writing,
For
essentially,
sure.
right? Like, as much as people say, like, oh, marketing is very creative, it's not. Like, not saying it's not creative, but I feel like I do a lot of writing, and especially, in an early startup stage and trying to get that awareness of what our company is out there. So I'm constantly writing for sales, whether it's one pagers, decks, any sales collateral that we're building. I'm, writing blogs. I'm writing, our teammates, if they're going to a conference, I'm helping build their profile for the conference that they're attending. And so I'm doing so much writing. And that's where I'm like, this is where my time suck is at my job. I spend so much time writing what is going to help me in making me write faster and output faster. And that's essentially what led me to ChatGPT slash, and then Copy AI in the end, because it helps me in getting this writing out faster.
Mhm. Yeah, and you say writing as a marketer, and I think that can be taken a lot of different ways. A lot of times people think, oh, you're a writer or you write a lot as a marketer. I'm thinking maybe my head's going towards blog posts day in and day out.
Right.
But to what you're stating is there's a lot of different types of writing. We
Yeah.
all know that, right? I mean, it might literally be a paragraph to describe a product on like a one pager, sales one pager, and you need to take maybe a 1,500 word blog post that was used to launch the product, and you need to drill that down into maybe
Exactly.
50 to 75 words. And I think that is where, so far, at least for me, we found a lot of like really solid use cases in that scenario. It's like reshaping content that we already like, right? And trying to drill it down. Like you mentioned some of those examples.
Yeah.
How have you seen, like, what has been the impact on you as a small team with the ability to kind of get some of those different versions out there?
We're definitely able to, I feel like it helps us to stay ahead of the game, especially in how fast like everything goes, right? Like now, back in the day, marketing was fast as like you get it done in a week. Now it's like you get it done in a day, and sometimes it's even hours, right? So it's really helped in essentially like augmenting me and making me faster and helping me go faster and getting this stuff out in the world, right? Like my sales team doesn't have to wait a couple of days for me to be like, oh, hey, like here's this one pager. I was able to create it in maybe half a day. Let's go through a few round of edits and see. And like, that's like a day now worth. So really love how fast we're able to output, the needs that my team needs or, whatever we're working on in that, especially because of how fast we need to work right now or, upcoming.
And the speed thing, I think it can't go to zero, right? Like, it's only we can only go so fast. But like, can you outline like what is that pressure like though? Like how have you, as a team of one, I mean, you're literally the smallest marketing team that you could be. So like, how has the pressure maybe changed? Do you find that management understands AI a little bit more and they have different expectations, or like what does that look like for you so far?
Yeah, I think I'm very lucky in that I work with a company that is AI, essentially. Like our product is AI backed. We've built essentially we're an AI conversational analytics platform, right? So we've essentially built our product off of humans and AI. So the people in our team are very knowledgeable and have been working like AI, NLP, ML for years. So they're aware of it, and for me, it's essentially like, because I am the lead of the team, is I set expectations, right? Like just because I can get something out fast doesn't mean I necessarily want to say like, oh yes, I can do this in a day. Like, we'll take a few days to make sure and setting that expectations with my team, because again, we don't want to just put something out there to put something out there. I can do that in seconds, right? Like I can show something in whatever, put it out there, but then it's not going to align necessarily with our brand. It's not going to align with our voice. And then that'll also, if we put out any kind of copy in some form out to the world that's not matching with us, people are going to know. Like it's very easy to decipher when something's been written by AI versus like if it was written by a human. So being thoughtful and very aware of what we're outputting while still trying to keep speed, but not speed to the point that it's impacting our brand in a negative way.
Yeah. And how do you know if it's like, what is the test that you run, like maybe just for yourself? It's like, how do you know if it's good enough or it sounds a little bit too much AI? Like, is that something that you run by someone else in the company, or like, what is that process now?
I actually don't run it necessarily by anyone in the company because nobody really has time. But I still read everything. Like I still, whatever is provided back to me, I read it. So I mentioned earlier that I go through multiple iterations of anything that writing until it gets to a point where I think it's matching our brand and our voice. There's a lot of words that in general, we don't use at Empathic in our technology, which AI tends to also use a lot. So I'm always, out And again, like AI tends to use a lot of very same words, which are easy to catch. There's, for example, like delve. Like I can
Delve.
tell, delve is used a lot, and that's typically used by AI. So that's all like, so I know there's some words, and I kind of have like a list in my head of what words that I know AI tends to use in copy, which I then stay away from, right? Because it'll even put it in mine, but then I'm like, no, I don't like this word. What's something else that we've used in our copy previously that matches what we're going with? So we really try to tone down that AI sense and still keep it like in our voice.
So if you think about, I mean, we've talked about writing quite a bit. It sounds like you have a good handle on how that's working for you now.
Yeah.
You've been able to work through those requirements. What are some other major areas, if you had to pick some spots where you would maybe test something next,
Sure.
like what does that look like for you, do you think?
I've actually did test budget, for example, more budget strategy. I think it helps in like helping you think through strategy depending on what you want to do. So for example, I received a budget to work with, and I was like, okay, knowing this is what I have coming up over the next year, and this is where I'm thinking I'm spending my money, or this is where I'm thinking I'm focusing, what is I would input a prompt. I would create my prompt and it was like, okay, I'm looking to figure out like, what is a great strategy based on like what our company is, who we're looking to go after and to spend, and like what does that breakout look like and where I should spend, whether it's SEO, SEO versus sales collateral versus conferences, et cetera, et cetera. And it was actually really fun to play with that because it was interesting to see like what I would thought in my head would make sense and then what AI thought would make sense based on our profile and who we're going after, and kind of playing back and forth with that. So I think it's really cool to like work with it from a strategy side to help you understand. I do know there's probably some budgeting tools that also help with like forecasting and stuff, but that's that's a little out of my league for sure. But I think it's really fun to try and work on it in different strategies, and that's probably one example. I've had it help me with press releases in all honesty, but again, that kind of goes back to writing, so that's a little.
Well, it's a different type of writing, like you talked
Yeah.
about, it's a different style.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you have to kind of adapt that way. And if you're not familiar in writing,
Yeah.
press releases all the time, it can certainly help.
Yeah. So I think there's definitely many use cases that I probably can't even think of right now from a marketing point that it can be used. Like I said, a lot of it can be from a creative side, which I don't use as much because we're pretty, we have our creative that we use in our brands pretty straightforward. I've done some outputs on it that I wasn't too fond of how it came out. There maybe are better tools out there that could help, but it's a cost factor most likely, and also time of figuring out what would work.
Yeah. And you mentioned something that was interesting, which I think is a good way to think about AI is, I mean, as a small team of one, it sounds like you're almost, if we go back to the budgeting scenario, it's like, hey, I want to brainstorm some
Yep.
different ideas, right? I want a different perspective. I want some
Right.
different inputs. And as a team of one, you
Yep.
have one perspective unless you have something to get some other inputs from. And so do you feel like that is something as a small team that you're using AI for? Like, how do you maybe explain that piece of it as
Yeah,
far as,
that when you say it that way, that I think that actually makes sense because, like, for me, in previous roles that I've worked, I've worked in various companies, whether large or small. But when you're working in particularly larger companies, you tend to have a team that you're working with, right? So you're able to think this through and say, okay, we're thinking of doing this, and then getting input from various people. So essentially, because I don't have that, I'm using it to help me to figure out different input based off what it's getting. Especially for me, is like I'm knowledgeable in marketing and what spend should be, but that doesn't mean I may necessarily be right, maybe, or it may not work out to what I was hoping for or thinking. So it's helpful to have like another head in helping me through that process, which essentially is like what I would be using. I'm using AI to do.
yeah. And so how do you, back to the testing piece, like if you do want to pursue another tool to maybe fill in a bigger gap in what you have, like how would you decide as to, okay, when is Kristina going to pursue like 2 days
Sure.
testing this new tool? It looks exciting. It promises a lot of things, but
Yeah.
I got to dive in
Mm-hmm.
and get a sense of whether it really works or not. So how would you make that decision?
So for me, I think it goes back to like strategy, right? Like, what is it do I need help on? And is this the right tool to help me in that? So making sure it can help me in what I need that help in first. Um, And then obviously it'd be funding, right? Like, do I have the money for it? Is it realistic in cost? And then comparing it to similar products. It's pretty easy to compare. You can even use the AI to compare products now at this point, right? So like, oh, I want to compare, I don't know, let's say like HubSpot marketing versus Salesforce marketing tool, and help me give me like a very simplified version of like, what's the difference between the tools, for example. But, just trying to do a comparison to see, okay. And then again, hopefully it has a free trial. Those I love very much because that gives me the opportunity to try it out before actually really committing to something at a cost, and hopefully having the time in a couple of days to do that.
Yeah. And how do you keep up to speed? Back to just like what we were talking through is, things are moving so fast. Sounds like you've settled in with Copy.ai as far
For
as like
now.
for now, for your writing solution. But how do you then keep up to speed with all of the different platforms? I mean, it seems like there's a new AI platform that comes out, or, a SaaS that has AI integrated in a new way. It's like every day things are changing. I mean, I'm subscribed to a bunch of newsletters.
Yeah.
I'm on Twitter all the time, but like, where do you get your information from? And then, how do you then apply it from there?
So that one's really hard because that's something I'm still struggling with now. Like similar to you, I'm on LinkedIn, so I'm constantly seeing what people are posting that I follow who are like, the influencers in whichever market I'm looking at, or, influencers in whichever space. I also subscribe to a bunch of newsletters, but I realize it's too many now to the point that I can't keep up with reading. And even, and the amount of emails I get to like, hey, try out my, my AI product and this and that. So it's actually been really, really hard to break through the noise and understand what's going to be best, which I think is why I've kind of just essentially receded and gone back to like, oh, well, I use HubSpot and it has AI built in it. And it's really doing what I need. So I don't really need to go look for anything else right now. So it's hard. Like I don't have an answer for that because I struggle with it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know if there is a great solution
Yeah.
because it is in fact moving so fast. And that's why I'm talking to people like you, because I do want to know what people, are really using in order to figure out, the information that's coming at them so fast.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting how things move forward. I mean, the pace of change is so quick, and more information, more newsletters coming out. And then I think you do get to that tipping point, like you say, where it's like, all right, this is just too much. Now I need to go back to what I'm doing, and I still need to do the work. And I think that's what we're talking about here is like, what is that balance to where, I mean, you could spend all day testing, but then you still have to get work done. And so I think that's just something marketers will have to deal with. Do you think this is maybe a big piece of marketing now? Like, as your role is like the sole marketer, do you feel like that AI in this testing piece is now like a crucial part of your job? How do you feel about that?
I definitely would say yes. I would say it's crucial for me because, instead of it's helping, as I mentioned before, it's really helping me move faster and getting out, the stuff that I'm working on, which it's been really helpful and beneficial for me. Not saying that my team would look down on me if it didn't move as fast, but I think it has really helped improve for us to be able to get our information out there quicker and faster, and hopefully keep being, at the top of that, rather being left behind in, of other companies who may do something similar and they're not utilizing it, right? So we're able to get out there faster, which I think is really important because, again, marketing, it just tends to get, shorter and faster.
Yeah.
And trying to keep up with that. And that's where, I think using AI tools to help you, if you're a marketer and at this point not using any form of AI, I think you're going to be really left behind because of the speed that it provides you now in being able to get information out.
And so a couple last questions for you. I mean, if you were speaking with someone else, maybe in your shoes at another company, another small marketing team of one, what advice would you give if they're behind you in the adoption of like, they don't have a Copy AI yet and they're still struggling? What advice would you give them in order to really just get over that hurdle and at least get some workflows moving?
I think, ChatGPT, it still has free versions. Essentially, like, try something for free. If marketing requires, requires a lot of writing, whatever you're doing requires a lot of writing. So try and find something that will help you in doing it in that process, right? So whether it's ChatGPT, Copy.ai, or some other product that can help you with your writing and modifying what you write and getting that out, I think that's a great starting point in trying to figure out how to get it, because it requires a lot of prompting, right? So you have to understand how to prompt. And in doing so, with all the writing that you're doing, you'll learn how to build those prompts and learn how to actually prompt much quicker and faster because of the amount of writing you're doing from a marketing standpoint. So I think trying to start in like what can help me and write faster and better and more, I think is a really great starting point.
Yeah, and I think when you look to find the types of writing to maybe test, this is how I think about it, and I'm interested to get your thoughts on that. So I tend to say, what do I absolutely hate writing? You know, and how, and like, how creative is this? And then really, is there a way that I could give it, I could give AI some inputs so that it could do something very close to this? And some examples that I've had, like one of those is just titles, meta tags, things like that. If I do an extract of all the web pages that we have on a client's website, and I want to do an inventory, and we want to maybe integrate a keyword into the title, but then we also just want to reformulate the title and make it better. Like I can do that in Google Sheets, integrate ChatGPT, and we can get like all of that done in a matter of like a couple of minutes to at least review all the material. And I would hate to do that manually for each one. It would be a nightmare.
Well, that's how we used to do it, right? Essentially, that's how we used to do it. I remember working with teams and spending days over like, okay, what are the SEO keywords we're trying to go after, and building out those lists and working in 1,000 Excel sheets. And it's very tedious work. So yeah, looking for anything to really help you in those tedious processes or something you don't like. Same thing, like, honestly, although I love marketing, I hate writing. Like, I'm not a fan of writing. It's just not, whatever. So it's probably why I started to begin with in, okay, how can I make writing easier and faster for me? Because like, yeah, I can write, I can do it. I've done it, all these things, but it takes up so much time. And for me, it's not my creative. Like, I'm more a visual creative than I am like a writing creative. So if I could spend more time on visual things, I'd rather do that. So that's essentially like why I started in the way that I did.
Yeah, no, I love that. And just, to kind of build upon what you're saying, I mean, another use case that came to mind like really early for me was formatting text content too. Like I hate cutting and pasting, adding bullet points. And it's like, here's the format that I want. I've written this before. I want you to now take this 2 to 3 pages, like maybe it's meeting minutes or maybe it's, a summary or something. And it's like, I want you to take that document and formulate it in this way. And you could even do HTML that way. And we've done that with, old blog posts from a client site that have all kind of ugly HTML. And in order to reformat it in a cleaner way, we're able to use ChatGPT for that. And that's just before it was incredibly manual, and there's nothing creative about that work at all. It is literally cutting and pasting and formatting.
Yeah, it is. And so it does. I think it helps out. I think AI is really helpful in helping out in like those tedious tasks that you don't necessarily like to do. Most people don't like to, some people do, I'm not saying people don't, but for people who don't have the time or just don't like to do it, it really helps in those really tedious, like I said, it could be something as small as, I want to turn this paragraph into bullet points, into talking points. Can you do it for me? And it'll, pull out whatever into, bullet point talking points for me, or, simplify that, which I really love. So I do love the variations in the format. Same thing with like keywords, right? Like, oh, what are some keywords that I think will be, you think will work with this blog? I'll agree with those keywords, but they're usually numbers. So like, okay, now put those keywords, remove the numbers and put a comma in. So I'm really just copying what it provided me and throwing it into the, whatever it is on the website for SEO, versus now having to write every single one out, and doing it. So even that, like, yeah, it saves a couple minutes of time, but it's still a couple minutes of time saves.
Yeah. And I feel like that's, at least for me, one of the big misconceptions is with AI. It's like, it's not a button that you press to get things done. There's still a lot of thought. You have to have the experience to know, like, what are the inputs and what are the outputs? Where do I want to go? And then you're just working with AI to help streamline that a little bit. At least that's where it is right now. I mean, who in the world knows where we'll be, another year or two, but that's how I kind of think about it, at least at the moment. Well, last question for you,
Sure.
Kristina. Like, how do you measure the success of AI in, your team of one? How do you know it's working for you or not?
That's an interesting question because I haven't yet, but that's maybe because where most of the tools I'm using, it's already built in, right? So I'm actually not looking at the success of AI in that sense. I'm more looking at the success of the product itself for me, right? So like if I'm using HubSpot to do some lead gen stuff, I look at the success of that lead gen campaign. I don't, especially with like, for example, Copy AI, I wouldn't look at it as if it's something. I don't know. I don't think I would. I haven't measured it, and I don't think I would because it's been so helpful in so many things. It's almost like it's just something. It's just helping. It's just helping me. Like I don't. It's hard to explain, but I don't know. I mean, I could, right? Like the time saved. I could say like, oh, I saved like 300 hours in writing.
Yeah.
Versus like the cost of this. How much time and minutes did that save me? I could probably do like a cost comparison in that to really see, but I just already understand. Because, for example, Copy AI being at the time, I don't know what it is now, but like the pricing was pretty low. For me, it was just like like that cost benefit's already there, just in me knowing how much time I saved on that. But again, like if in the future, once we start having to most likely use those tools, it comes down to again strategy and what you're using it for, right? So depending on whatever my strategy is, and I can measure it. But again, I don't think it's necessarily measuring AI. It's really just measuring that tool itself and if it's helping, doing what it needs to do for what you're looking for it to do.
Yeah, and I'll leave you with this. I think that is what I'm seeing with smaller teams. It's like,
Yeah.
hey, AI is helping me,
Yeah.
making more efficient. But I think what we will start to see is leadership teams will start to evaluate. Okay,
Yeah.
I have a large team of BDRs where
Right.
I have a team of 10 marketers here. Do I need 10? Is there a way that we can streamline what we're doing,
Right.
reduce? And it's like the budget remains the same, but do I need a different mix of that budget? And I think there's still a lot of gray area right now. And that's where we probably will get to. And we'll start to see some of those, see how that shakes out here
Yeah.
soon. It's just interesting because things are moving so fast. So it's like companies are like, well, I can't take 6 months to figure out what the
Right.
team looks like because I have to then move just as quick. So
Mhm.
it's just a weird balance to strike. And I think that's
Yeah.
why.
And I think, I think it comes down to is like really, and again, I think for marketers, I would say my piece of advice is if you're not using AI, you have to start using it. Like it doesn't matter because it blew up so fast, like everybody wants it. And essentially now, if you're a marketer, if you at your current job or moving to another job, they're going to expect you to have some kind of AI knowledge in some form in the work that you're doing. Because like, if you think about it, when companies start downsizing, what are the first teams to usually be downsized, right? It's marketing. So if you're able to say like, okay, well, I'm able to use these tools to help me in my marketing, that gives you that leg up to then say, versus maybe someone who doesn't know how to do it, which is a shame. It is. But again, when you have to think from the company perspective, okay, we're about cost, budget, and the bottom line. How do we make that smaller so we can increase our profit? So for you, it's like, okay, well, I know my company is doing that. So how do I make myself more valuable to the company so that I can remain in what I'm doing? And again, because it can help you in depending on what you're doing to be faster and in the work that you're outputting, as long as that work matches what the company is looking for and it's quality work, right? It's not just quantity, it's really the quality of the work that you're outputting. It really puts you at I think it puts you at a really higher level than someone who doesn't maybe have that. So I said even like the prompt engineering aspect, like I think you really need to understand your strategy and then how to prompt engineer. And that just requires a lot of like plug and play and lots of reiterations of I was like, oh, this works. I can now use this for future reference to work off of and like saving that. So it's just a lot of, strategy essentially is what it comes down to. So you're thinking about strategy and how you can make yourself more strategic for wherever you're going or who you're working for.
Yeah, love that. It's a good way to leave things there for folks. I mean, I think that's a big message. You don't really have a choice at this point.
Yeah.
You do as a marketer. You have to understand it. You have to apply it. You got to test it. You got to roll it out. So,
Exactly.
well, thanks for sharing, your story. I think it's important. Team of one, understand like your approach to it. And we all kind of learn from each other,
Yeah.
how and when we're implementing these types of tools. So Last thing for you,
Yeah.
Kristina, where can people go to find out more about you, your
Sure.
company, et cetera?
Yeah, so you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm on there pretty often because I do a lot of posting for our company, Empathic, on LinkedIn as well. So you can follow us. You can follow our company there. We're Empathic.ai. So it's very easy to find us. I'm just saying I'm not really on too much any other. So I'd say LinkedIn. LinkedIn's probably like the biggest one that I'm really on. And I'm in the Philly area. So if anyone's up for some coffee meets, I'm also down for that. I attend some tech events around here as well. So if you're around and want to say hi, please do.
All right.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Well, Kristina, thanks for being one of our first few guests here on Creative Operations.
Thank you,
And
Tristan. I
you,
appreciate it.
you did a great job with your first podcast episode.
Thank you.
So, all right. Well, thanks for joining us today on Creative Operations.
Awesome. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Creative Operations, the podcast for B2B marketers who want to get into the weeds and figure out how to get work done. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to follow Creative Operations wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, or access all episodes at marketsindemand.com/creativeoperations.